All right. Well, I'm here with Joel Snead. And Joel, as a couples therapist and someone who specializes with anger and anxiety, we've got 10 more minutes. So, what's one thing you would love for the world to know?
I think something that I see and deal with personally, but also with clients a lot, is there's this. I think a lot of us function out of this belief that there are good and bad emotions, and that some emotions are bad, and the bad emotions we need to avoid them, or we need to fix them, or change them, or whatever. And a lot of times, so thinking from an anger and anxiety perspective, from what I've seen, that actually is what leads to a lot of struggle with anger or anxiety, is this belief that there are good and bad emotions. And so I actually push against that and argue that there are pleasant and unpleasant emotions. They're all good, they're all healthy. Some are a little bit more uncomfortable to have to experience or feel through, but at the end of the day, they're all good.
Nice. And you mentioned a little bit about this that you see it with your clients and yourself. So, how did you come to understand this and discover this?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is work in the counseling session, and just as I was working with clients over an extended period of time, you start to see common threads of belief systems. And I the cool thing about counseling, and you can attest to this, is when we're working with our clients, it's also really cool because we kind of get to do our own work too, right? And I mean, there's sometimes in session where I'm working with a client and it's what they're dealing with, or even things that they may say or respond to things, is speaking to me and challenging me in my own growth and healing, right? And so I think over time, starting to see some themes or some threads that are pretty prevalent in belief systems and worldviews, particularly around emotions. And I think I see it a lot, especially in men, right? There's this
Okay.
cultural idea of what masculinity looks like, and I'm pretty passionate about challenging that. But you see that a lot where, the two cultural beliefs around emotions that I've seen. So for men, emotions are weak or a waste of time. And for women, emotions are dramatic,
Mm,
right? And I would argue that that's not inherently the case.
nice.
Can we be weak in feeling emotions? Sometimes. Can it be a waste of time? Sometimes. But feeling emotions in and of itself is not weak or a waste of time, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. So good, yes. As you were talking, I was thinking, yes, it's like more, it seems like men tend to accept anger more, maybe, and women accept anxiety more, or just at least talk about it. And, I'm wondering how this belief that there's good and bad emotions, how does it play out for people?
Yeah, so because of the beliefs behind emotions being either good or bad,
Hmm.
whenever we experience a quote unquote bad emotion, that's a threat to our system because
Right.
it's bad to feel that thing, right? No matter why it's bad, it's bad. That's the way that our system is reading it. And so where I believe anger and anxiety have come from is that they function as a protective emotion.
Hmm.
So they function to actually pull us out of whatever bad emotion that we're experiencing in the moment, right?
Hmm.
And they work really well because anger, most people who go to anger, you end up expending a lot of energy and
Yes.
focus really trying to control that anger,
Yeah.
just because most people care about their impact on the people around them, and they're able to have enough self-control to not lash out in that anger. Sometimes we get to a place where it builds up and we actually can't control it and we do lash out and things happen. But it works well because if I'm so focused on trying to control my anger, I'm not focused on what's actually leading to the anger,
Hmm.
which is the threatening emotion that's underneath it, right?
Hmm.
And anxiety works really well because it sucks. It's really uncomfortable and we want to escape it as fast as possible, right?
Yes.
And so most of our focus goes to trying to get rid of the anxiety rather than focusing on what's actually driving the anxiety.
Totally. So totally a distraction. Well, tell me, okay, so how what's if someone wants to work on this, what's the first step they would take?
So I think Partially, it is a challenging the belief around good and bad emotions. That's initially like, I'm not going to be willing to engage with something if I believe it's bad,
Mm,
right? And so the first step actually is starting to challenge that belief. And the way that I challenge it is I shift the verbiage that we use to pleasant and unpleasant,
mm-hmm.
right? That pleasant is not good or bad. It may feel good, but that doesn't mean it is good. It just feels good, right? And unpleasant isn't bad. It might be uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean that it's bad, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's a more true representation of the way we experience whatever the particular emotion
Mm-hmm.
is to define it as how we're experiencing it, pleasant, unpleasant, right?
Yes.
And it moves us away from a judgmental perspective of it, right? Good and bad is a judgment statement. Pleasant and unpleasant is not judgmental. It's just describing what the experience feels like for us.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And it's like you can't. Judging it doesn't make a difference anyway because it comes from the limbic system, which is a totally unconscious place. And so I think
Hmm.
people wrestle with their emotions like, why can't I get rid of this? Rather than like, okay, I think you're saying remove the judgment so you can drop into it
Yep.
and deal with it. Okay.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And that actually frees us up to then engage with whatever the emotion or those emotions are.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I'm judging it as bad, I'm not going to be willing to engage with it.
Yeah.
If I'm able to see it as unpleasant, it frees me up to then say, okay, well, let me see what's going on here and see if I can learn how to engage with this emotion
Yeah.
rather than trying to get rid of it.
And I like that you use pleasant and unpleasant because it engages some somatic, some body. It's like, yeah, it
Hmm.
makes my tummy hurt, or it makes my head spin, or it makes me want to go to bed, or it makes me want to punch a wall rather than makes me feel light, makes me feel confident. So, yeah, there's some, okay, cool.
And I think that's actually how we experience emotions first. I think we actually feel in the body the emotion, and those emotions that are unpleasant, typically what we're trying to escape is the unpleasant sensation that we're experiencing, right? Now,
Hmm.
some people have done enough work to figure out what to call it, but what everybody knows is this doesn't feel good. I
Right.
want to escape this feeling, whether they know what to name it or not, right?
Totally. Wow. Yeah, absolutely. So that would be the first step. So what's an obstacle that people face when moving towards this?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I think there's a lot, but if I'm trying to encapsulate it into something
Yeah, like a common
that people
obstacle.
that people experience fairly often, I would say it kind of connects to the cultural perspective of feeling emotions as a waste of time.
Yeah.
I think because a lot of times for us to engage with our emotions, it doesn't feel like we're doing anything.
Mm.
It doesn't feel like I'm actually making progress or moving forward, right? It's like, okay, so I'm just going to sit here and feel sad. Well, what does that do, right? And so I think that actually does tend to be an obstacle because until you've experienced processing through an emotion in a healthy way and recognizing how you feel, not just somatically, but the clarity in your mind and the ability to tap back into energy that you've been wasting. There's a lot of benefits to
Wow.
doing this, but until you've experienced it, feels like there's this thought component. Logically, it doesn't make sense. Like, why would I feel sad when I could just suppress it and go do stuff? Or if I could get rid of the thing that's making me sad, right?
Yeah. Nice, nice. And last question, how do I know if I'm doing it right?
That's So something this is I think this is a little bit more of a difficult one because it's based on sense, right? That's I think the things that you can start to take into account of is normally whenever this happens, my first thought is, ugh, that's so frustrating. This time when that similar thing happened, I thought, man, that's pretty disappointing,
Hmm.
right? I was rather than going to Let me describe this real quick because I think it'll bring a little context to what I just said. I would argue that anger and anxiety function as protective emotions, but when I'm talking about anger, I'm talking about anger and its lower forms.
Mm.
So, irritation, annoyance, frustration. Those are all forms of anger that kind of manifest a little bit differently, but they all work to protect us, right? So whenever I'm saying I'm frustrated, what I'm actually saying is I'm mad about something just on a lower level of anger, right? But rather than feel mad about the thing, I actually notice what I'm feeling, which is disappointed about the thing, right? When I'm actually learning how to pinpoint and acknowledge specific emotions that I'm experiencing in a moment, that's where I'm starting to make some progress because I'm not going to the protective emotion first. I'm going to the emotion that is driving the protective emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense how I'm
Yeah, I love it.
talking
Yeah.
through it? Okay.
Yeah, it's like more nuanced and then
Mhm.
also not as sharp, sort of blunted reaction. Like, okay, I might take a breath 2 out of 3 times or 1 out of 2 times
Yes.
instead. So that's how I know I'm on the right track.
Yeah, I think I like what you just said there, and what it triggered in my mind is the thought of starting to become less reactive,
Yeah.
right? I'm not just reacting to a thing. And my definition, I like to encourage clients to move from reacting to responding. The difference being a reaction is it's a very primal, instinctual thing, right? As soon as I experience something, it happens right behind it. Whereas a response is I actually take a moment before I decide how I'm going to act on that, whether it's act of thinking about what I just experienced or an action with my body or words or whatever.
Hmm.
I'm actually taking a small pause there and thinking about it, considering what I just experienced before I act on it. And
Yeah.
so that's actually how I think you start to recognize that you are making progress is I'm starting to become less reactive and I'm learning how to respond to these situations more often, right?
Yes, that sounds like so wonderful. I think it's what so many people want for themselves and in their couple
Hmm.
relationship.
Hmm.
And I think something you said also before was like, yeah, you feel more energetic, you get your energy back, you feel more clear-headed and more focused. Okay, well, that's our time. So thank
Yeah,
you so much.
you're welcome.
Maybe we can continue the conversation sometime.
I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can do this again. We can talk from all different angles. I love it. This is
amen.
fun.
Yes, agreed. Well, thank you so much. Bye.
You're welcome. Thanks, Maria.
All right, don't go.